Hi, this is Margaret Meloni, and welcome to the Death Dhamma Podcast. Together we will consider life, death, and impermanence. Because in between birth and death, we lose things. Not just our glasses and our keys. We lose identities, relationships, ideas, and more. But what we can gain right now is facing this together, and we will gain freedom, peace, and progress on our path. Everyone, today I have the amazing Ratnadevi with me, and I am so happy, and she is going to discuss with us the impermanence that happens in our lives and other things as our conversation progresses. And I would first like her to have an opportunity to share with all of you what she wants you to know about who she is. Tell us about yourself, Ratnadevi, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be delighted. So I'm German by birth, and you may hear this from my accent, but I've lived in the UK for 40 years, and that's roughly the time I've also been an ordained Buddhist. Now, well, actually a Buddhist ordained since 30 years ago. And so what I do at the moment in Glasgow is I work as a mindfulness teacher and trainer. We train mindfulness teachers. It's quite a small setup, but I quite like that. It gives us a lot of freedom. Mm-hmm. And I should describe myself now as an author as well, because I have actually recently published my first book on mindfulness. It's called Bringing Mindfulness to Life. Mm-hmm.
And where can we find that? I'm sorry, now I'm being rude. But I'm excited about your book too. So where will we find that? Where can we buy your book?
Well, we decided for the time being to leave it off Amazon, but it's available through place-based publications.
Okay.
And if you Google my name, Ratnadevi, Bringing Mindfulness to Life, that will come up.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I'm sorry, I interrupted your flow, but I wanted people to know about your book.
No, I appreciate that. Yes. We have just, it sold quite well. You know, it's been out since January, and we are in our second edition already. So I'm quite excited about that. We're planning a book tour in the summer through various Buddhist centers in the UK. And I'm going to combine it with some workshops on some of the themes that are in the book. Bringing mindfulness to life is very much about daily experiences, including loss and dying, and how we deal with the climate crisis, and the things that people are really concerned about, but not in an abstract way. It's very much a personal storytelling, which seems to go down very well. People can relate to it.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think that mindfulness probably helps us a lot as we deal with these, I call it the little D, and in the podcast, we've talked about death, like the real death of a sentient being. But, this season, we just happen to be talking about what I call the little D, which is, along the path, the impermanence and things that we drop and lose and face. And I'm imagining that in your experience as a mindfulness teacher, you can see how mindfulness helps us.
Absolutely. I think that almost every aspect of mindfulness and of Buddhism as well is actually at its core helping us to deal with the facts of life. Loss and death is just something that concerns us all. So you could almost look at any teaching and you'll find the relevance there. And actually, it's not just true about Buddhism or secular mindfulness, but other religions as well. Like I recently, just a few days ago, was in a concert of the St. Matthew's Passion by Bach, because it's just Easter time.
Yes,
doing this, and I was just struck by both the beauty of the music and how it relates so intimately to suffering. It's about the crucifixion. It's about torture, really, when you look at it. And it's about how we can come to terms with it. I think a lot of people could probably feel the relevance as the war in the Ukraine is going on, and so there's a lot of suffering in the world, and how to be with that is just has always been the stuff of religion. But even for somebody who is not a religious person, that's what we have to come to terms with.
I think our different religions are helping us manage our responses to life using different ways, different kinds of teachings, right? But that this suffering is part of the human condition, whether we acknowledge it or not. I just think that Buddhism really comes right out and just calls it out, which, by the way, I think makes some people very uncomfortable.
Yeah. But actually, I was just struck in being brought up a Christian and being in that church context and seeing that big Jesus on the cross metaphor there, it actually is really strong in in Christianity as well, But that we are confronted there with this image of suffering. In Buddhism, we have got beautiful Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who are smiling with equanimity. So it's almost like one step further in the resolution of suffering. But I think that step of really facing it and allowing ourselves to feel the sorrow must be part of it, of dealing with it.
And as you've been teaching and you've been ordained all this time, I bet you have some examples or stories of experiences in your life or that you've observed with others, because lots of people come to you for guidance, of losing something, not necessarily a death, although we absolutely can talk about that too, but the loss of an idea or a thing or an expectation.
Yeah, many examples. So I was thinking though to maybe stick a bit closer to the present time.
Okay.
My mum is going to go into palliative care probably tomorrow.
Okay.
And so it's like that's an impending loss.
Yes.
To come to terms with. But sort of I've also just recently, like my mum can hardly hear anymore, and I have also hearing aids now, and so there's the loss of hearing. So that's a very small example. I think we learn so much through these very small losses of how to prepare ourselves, for the big D. So I was thinking about that. I could talk about that a little bit, how that's been. There's also a recent loss of a friendship that has been in my life for the last 15 years, and it might just collapse, and that it brings lots of feelings with it as well. And then there's lots of pain in the world going on there. It's like a sort of loss of faith in humanity, maybe, and looking at the climate change, I can sort of feel there's a change there in how I regard that and the pain that is around. I say it's a kind of loss, a loss of a belief that human beings can actually manage to somehow survive on this planet. Doesn't look very hopeful really at the moment.
That is difficult. And with that loss of faith in humanity, whether it be, I can't believe you're attacking this country, or I can't believe you're not going to do anything about the climate, it also sometimes comes a loss of hope. So it's the loss of faith and hope together, I guess, because if I started thinking, I can't believe any of you are going to be able to pull this off, then that also means I'm losing my hope. So that's like a double loss.
Yes. I don't know if you know the work of Joanna Macy, who has done a lot of work in the area of climate change, and she has written a book called Active Hope. And she also says more recently, looking for some certainty that what we are doing and how we engage ourselves might actually lead to positive results is a bit of a waste of time. We can't afford to wait till we have that certainty. We need to just act in alignment with our deep values and our compassion, and do it together with other human beings. And we have to do it now. John Kabat-Zinn says the same thing, the founder of the big secular mindfulness movement. So it's interesting, hope.
Do you feel like we need to be in two places? One, with the hope that we can do something, that we will make a difference, and that the earth also will be resilient, but then also in the acceptance of what might be. And how do we do that? I guess maybe my question is more like, how do we do that? So on the one hand, when I say I don't want to believe that this is the end, I don't mean that I don't believe in the signs. I guess what I'm saying is I want to think that there's a chance that we might be able to do something to change, or that the earth will heal. But then I also think there's this need to be ready.
What do you mean, the need to be ready for?
For whatever might come. whatever might come. I mean,
Like being prepared for the worst sort of thing, or
right. And is that wrong view? What do you think?
Well, it's really very similar to contemplating our personal death. We know that we are going to die. We're also actually knowing that humanity is not going to thrive on this planet forever. Whatever the conditions are, it's just the natural law of things. We know that in our heads, but how deep in our bones, in our hearts, do we know that, and how much have we really made peace with it, and a kind of peace that allows for joy, for joyful living in the midst of everything that is going on? There are big questions, I don't have easy answers either. Sometimes I think it's about really letting go of the resistance to the fears around death, personal or planetary death, and just because that is really pain that we can avoid, that secondary suffering. So if we can just allow ourselves to embrace the actual experience of pain, that can lead us, in my experience, actually to a sense of sorrow that has got a universal element to it. So it's more than just my own small self that is afraid of survival, but there is a sense that we are in this together, which changes everything remarkably. I think that's where the Buddhist concept of compassion comes in, and like these beautiful figures like Huan Yin and Avalokiteshvara, who they welcome the cries, the tears of the world. That is the essence of their being, and they're full of beauty and joy. That's remarkable to cultivate an image like that, and particularly if it just becomes a felt experience. And I think sometimes there's two things that I think help me, to come to that place of living in a place of inspiration in the midst of difficulty. So one is again and again to embrace what's difficult, open the heart.
Okay.
Knowing that it is universal. So it's not about my small self. The other one is just to learn again and again to value what is beautiful in the moment, and practice gratitude and deep appreciation for that. And that sort of cultivates the necessary positivity, I think. And it brings us in touch, if we're looking in terms of brain science, with the soothing system of our organism, if we are dwelling on the things that are positive and on love, in our immediate environment and so on. And then we can use that relative calm that comes from that state of being to open ourselves to what's difficult. If we do that without that preparation, we just get overwhelmed, I think, by fear. So it's like the two hand in hand, despair and grief and all that we can become stuck in it. It can become overwhelming. It can become depressing if we are not wisely managed, our nervous system.
Yes. And I think there's a lot of conversation going on about that these days in a secular way too, because so many people are having anxiety and stress. And I know other generations every generation is always hit with a lot. And maybe each generation always thinks they're hit with more than the previous generation. And that could be true. I don't want to judge that. I just know that every generation goes through some really difficult things. And that, now when you see people talk about, like, well, your grandparents went through, depending on how old your grandparents are, your grandparents could have gone through the first pandemic. They could have gone through the 1918 flu pandemic. They could have gone through a few wars. Then if they're still here, they're going through this, and we all go through.
We all go through it, and we all struggle in some way or another. And we all find the ways that work for us. Like, I think about my mum again, who has been through some of these traumatic experiences in Germany, the Second World War.
Yes.
She had a nervous breakdown at the end of that, and she hasn't had the tools that we have to do the trauma work, the healing. And so that's partly informs her difficulty to let go now. She is really struggling to, it's been going on for a couple of years of does she want to live or die? And I think what helps her, it was quite moving to hear that, she of course doesn't meditate. She's also not going to church anymore. And I'm not so sure about her belief in God, but what she does, because she was a singer and a musician, and helped us all. All her 4 children also became musicians, and so she has been singing these beautiful, this church music, basically Bach, Mozart, Pergolesi, and had solo. She had a beautiful soprano voice, and so she has experienced a lot of spiritual fulfillment in this type of music that often is actually very intimately involved with sorrow and pain. A lot of music actually has got that plaintive element in it, hasn't it? It's sort of transforming it into something beautiful, and which makes it possible to stay open-hearted, with it. Right. And she says when she couldn't sleep and was depressed and so on over the last few years, she often brings to mind those cantatas and arias she sang and relives them, and that gives her peacefulness, and she can let go and die. And I just hope that she, in the next few days or weeks, when it gets towards the end of her days, that she'll be able to stay in contact with that. Because I think that's probably what a lot more Buddhist practices is about, establishing such a strong inner momentum towards peace, deep inner peacefulness and resolve, that when the going gets really hard, it will still be available, that it won't be drowned out by the immediacy of the stress that will be there then.
That makes sense. There was somebody I spoke to recently, and he was talking about how after, having been Buddhist for 20 years, then he says, then I got put to the test, as it were. And it was also about his mother. Losing our parents is very difficult, of course. And he said, he got the phone call of his mother being terminally ill. And he said it was interesting to be an observer of, because for some people, I think there's a wondering all the years of practice. Sometimes, you maybe, I don't know if you ever went through this, but some of us go through that. Like, is this doing anything? Do I feel different? Am I being different? And so he got to feel and observe himself being different. And he said it was like all of a sudden somebody turned on the tap water, and my Buddhist practice just flowed into the situation.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yes, I've heard that from people as well, that they were quite surprised by it almost, having had some doubt about it, and then in that situation of need, it was just there.
Yes, so and I feel like that's what you were just referencing when you were saying that hopefully, like this deeper, access of this deeper way of accessing inner peace, that it will be there and keep being there, because we are going to need to draw upon it. Yes. And I think it's interesting too, when you share about your mother, and it struck me as one of these examples of impermanences that we face through life. So there's your mother, a beautiful soprano singer, and she's singing these songs that are about sorrow. And I feel like what you were saying to us is like the way those songs of sorrow can get, if we're open to it, they can come within us and lift the sorrow out, help us express what we're feeling. If we have a hard time expressing what we're feeling, that music is a way of expressing the sorrow.
Yes, it makes it bearable, and even something that is rightfully there. So, it's like if for hundreds of years this beauty has been created out of sorrows, it just helps us to really appreciate it and stop resisting it, basically. Like coming back full circle, maybe, I was in this concert in this beautiful cathedral in Edinburgh. The Dunedin Ensemble were doing St. Matthew Passion. And there I was with my hearing aids, and so my little personal loss. And then what I could hear was all this rustling of the program 400 people turning the pages of the program. So that was louder almost than the music, which is partly because it's all still quite new, I think, and maybe my brain will adjust to it. But I could see, okay, I have got a choice here. Either I could bemoan the loss of something that was before, what I considered like the most beautiful experience of the music, and particularly also as a professional musician, which I was. So I could sort of maybe get a little bit stuck in the in the moaning about it, or I could just become curious and interested in the experience. In fact, it's taking me out of autopilot in quite an amazing way without me having to do very much about it. Everything is different in my auditory field. And it's actually really interesting. I mean, who is saying that one particular way of perceiving the world is the right one, or that is some reflection on reality? It's all this experience is mediated. It's a dance between some events of waves out there, sound waves in this case, and my perceptual apparatus, and what's happening in the brain, how this is interpreted. There is no perfect way how this music should sound. So it just helped me. I think my mindfulness practice and this appreciation of being present with the senses, whatever they are, definitely helped me to keep, stay actually quite interested. Okay, this is different from how it was 10 years ago, but it's just that, it's just different. It's still beautiful.
And I'm envisioning this experience, and I apologize if I'm off base, and I trust you to correct me. I'm envisioning this experience where, so you've gone through this, and you have the hearing loss and you get the hearing aids, and then you're going to this concert, maybe let's say the first time you're going to a concert with the hearing aids.
That's right.
And I would imagine that logical Ratnadevi knew that things were going to be different, but emotional other Ratnadevi was in some level remembering the past time you went to a concert and what it was like, and sitting down and maybe expecting that. And then it wasn't that. So then you walk in, you're changed. So you've already got the impermanence of your hearing, but there's still this idea of here's how this is going to be, right? We have expectations.
Yes, it is again what I was talking about. Like there is a reason why we like repetition. It just keeps us safe. We are programmed as human beings, that to recognize patterns. Okay, this is what it should be like. If it veers from that too much, it might be dangerous. It might be alarming. So I think that's what happens. We get triggered in some way. What is this? And we quickly jump to resisting the experience in some way. And I think mindfulness training just helps to see these connections quite quickly before they take hold, and lead to certain mind patterns, certain inner messages. I might tell myself about, oh gosh, I'm going to be like Beethoven, who, will just lose all his hearing, and, and it's going to be a big catastrophe, and it lead to being lonely because my mum is actually lonely. But, so there's like having that as a negative role model in front of me. But it doesn't have to be like that.
No, it doesn't. And it sounds like, no pun intended, that you worked your way through it. And so you sit down and you hear the rustling, because I can understand that, because that's the sound that's closest to you is, me with my program. And that's what the hearing aids picked up first, or more strongly, is the rustling of paper. And then I would imagine you worked with yourself, because I don't know, I would have been at first a little annoyed, because I'd be like, I'm not here to hear the paper, I'm here to hear the music.
I know where you're leading to, and I think this experience there is a moment of reactivity, but I was surprised that it didn't last very long.
Because of your training, I think.
Because of my training, exactly. Yes. Can smile about the reactivity, and I almost don't take it so personally. It's not about me having, I don't know, like it being unfair or whatever I might say. It's just what it is. And there is a mourning there, there is an experience of loss there, and the music goes with it just beautifully. The music is just helping me to connect to the universality of it.
And that's just a short clip of some of the music she's referencing. So as you left, so eventually the concert ends and you left, and I'm thinking that during the course of this concert, you had the rising and ceasing of these different emotions and experiences. You had this experience of this acceptance, the conquering of the resistance, which I do think sometimes it's the resistance to impermanence, which is so causes us so much damage.
Yeah, and I would use the word embracing the resistance rather than conquering it, because that's what it feels like. It's
embracing.
Like, yes, there is an element of understanding, of befriending, because it is so, we just do that as human beings.
You're right. I like that word also. I think embracing is definitely a better word, because it's only a struggle if we make it a struggle. But when we embrace, and you brought up the phrase, and I use this phrase often, too much, but I keep using it, which is, this is how it is. When we embrace, when you were able in that concert to embrace, this is how it is, then I feel like you became, I'm going to say, like, friends with the experience. You became within the experience and accepting of, this is how a concert is now.
Yes.
Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it is. And something else comes from it as well, like me sharing this with others, like with you and, whoever is hearing this. But also with some of my students, or it might go into my writing. So there is a sense that this is just a little example of a universal experience. I don't know what the percentages of people who will have hearing aids at some point, probably quite high. And it just feels so wonderful to, not that I want to sort of aggrandize myself and say I've sort of resolved everything about this, not at all, but it's living through it with curiosity and appreciation of the creative potential in all of this, which makes all the difference.
I'm reminded of this acceptance of, like, who will have hearing loss and the acceptance of the experience. I'm reminded of my own parents, because my mother swore, especially as they were elder, that, and it is true that throughout his life, my dad did have, we called it his bad ear, because as a child, I think his eardrum had burst. And so he did have an ear, like if you were on that side, he could not hear you as well. And my mother swore as they got older, his hearing was really bad. He couldn't hear a thing she was saying. And so she brought him to get the hearing aids, and he got the hearing aids. And, my mom was happier about things, and because she became very agitated with my father's hearing loss and his inability to communicate with her. And she became very agitated and sometimes angry. The reason I'm laughing is, after he passed, my mom was sitting with some of her friends, and she kind of started doing the same thing to them. She would kind of say, like, her experience was, she was saying something and no one was responding to her. And were they all deaf? And finally, one of her friends turned and looked at her and said, "No, Joanne, you are the one who cannot hear us responding." And then in that moment, my mom had one of her own, embracing of the experience, which was, "Oh, it's me." And then she went and got hearing aids. And so I don't know if my dad really needed hearing aids, or he needed hearing aids because my mom told him he needed hearing aids. But at any rate, then she had to embrace her own experience of, "Oh, it's me." And then she went and got her hearing aids, and then she had better conversations.
It's just the power of acceptance, isn't it?
Yes.
It does seem to be, we seem to be needing to relearn that again and again.
Right. Because we're all going to have these different impermanences. So yes, we're talking about the impermanence of a hearing loss and hearing aids and acceptance and resistance. But as we move forward in life, we're going to have these different experiences.
We will have, and a lot of it is actually physical, that I'm stuck by that as well. Yes, there is loss of friendship and so on, but or facing humanity, but a lot of the nitty-gritty learning that we all seem to be needing to do is to do with the gradual decline of our physical functions and illnesses and so on. A good friend of mine who I regularly Skype with said that she's about my age, sort of in her early 60s, and she said that she has this disease where her hair is basically dropping out, starting with her eyebrows and then her forehead, and it's not reversible in her case, so she will basically just lose all her hair. And she said when she talked to the doctor about it, she was sort of making light of it. Oh, well, it's not the worst thing that could happen, and the doctor actually said, look, losing your hair is a big thing. And he was just psychologically it is a big thing, and particularly for a woman maybe. And it just actually made her think, yes, maybe we are a bit too quick as Buddhists sometimes to jump to that stage of acceptance, when really we need to just allow ourselves a little bit more of the mourning and see that as a positive experience. And then I'm a practitioner of NVC, nonviolent communication, which is very much focusing on needs and the qualities of needs, whether they are met or not met. And one thing I really like about this system is that mourning, like grieving, is actually seen as a positive universal need that needs to be given its space. It's like it's the other side of the coin of celebration. And often in a situation where other needs are not being met, like to be heard, to be understood, to have fulfillment in a particular career or whatever it is, when we have tried our very best and it's still these needs are not being met, then mourning is just the next stage. And when we enter into it with a sense of agency and a confidence that this is actually a really worthwhile process to submit to surrender to, then it can actually become a deeply transformative experience.
I'm so glad you're bringing that up. I do think that sometimes some people misunderstand, and they think that accepting impermanence, moving to a place of acceptance, means that a good Buddhist, I'm holding up my hands in air quotes right now, that a good Buddhist isn't sad or isn't upset. And I think that that's an unfair expectation of any of us, of humanity. And I think that the acceptance of her, so for your friend, the acceptance of her hair loss absolutely helps her handle dealing with the loss. But I don't believe there's any teaching that means if you're enlightened, you're not allowed to be sad, or that to be enlightened, you must never feel sadness.
No, absolutely not. I think compassion and mourning are very closely related. I don't think we can come to a place of deep compassion when we don't allow the depth of experience. There's this beautiful line of Rilke. He just says something about that unites of anguish. Why didn't I kneel more deeply to accept you, inconsolable sisters? And surrendering, lose myself in your loosened hair. How we squander our hours of pain, how we gaze beyond them into the bitter duration to see if they have an end, though they are really our winter. I just love that. Really, like, lose myself in your loosened hair. It's just such a beautiful expression.
It is beautifully expressed, and it's acknowledging the need for mourning, for grief, and to go all in.
Yeah, but sometimes also just allowing for times when that doesn't seem to be the case. Like when I was in that concert, I was more curious than sad, and that's all right as well. I mean, it's just like seeing what actually, and acknowledging whatever really is there in our own experience. and not limiting ourselves.
Is it fair to think that this is where equanimity comes in, that my equanimity will help me understand when, and I'm going to say for me, because I think it's different for each of us as individuals, when a deeper mourning makes sense. So for example, I think we would all agree that if I went into a deep sense of mourning because I misplaced my keys, many of us would be puzzled by my need to do that. And I might need some help, right? But if when I go into a deep mourning over losing a friendship, or the loss of a loved one, I think most of us would see that. But it's within me to accept the level of mourning that I need. What I like about what your friend's doctor said, I feel like, and I don't know the doctor at all, but I feel like he was asking her to take a beat and pause and acknowledge this is a big deal, so that he wanted her to get with it mentally and emotionally before she skipped on to this is no big deal.
Exactly. He was a wise person, I think.
Yes, I think so too. Because he has seen other patients go through this.
Yes.
So do you feel like there's a specific teaching or teachings that has been the most helpful, either to yourself or to your students, in terms of helping us develop this mindfulness of impermanence?
Well, it's something about how all the teachings hang together and one affects the other. I was looking at, probably familiar with this acronym RAIN that Tara Brach has brought to many people's attention. So I've developed this a little bit further into raining. And
let's hear that. That sounds great.
Yeah, so it's so they recognize for the R. So, an example, I was actually thinking about the war in the Ukraine, which is just so near to us, actually. So just bringing to mind some of the images, of refugees and, having lost all their possessions and, the horrendous killings that have been happening and so on. So allow some of that into awareness. Then the A, just helps to become a bit more acquainted with these feeling states in us. And it might just take a little journey from numbness or maybe a bit of blaming at the beginning, to maybe then just feeling also some helplessness, and just feeling it all in the body, really. That's the important thing. And looking for a fit of sensations and language. So dismay, helplessness, and what came to me was something about moral injury, the pain that comes from actions being committed by myself or others that are not in alignment with my values. And so then all these experiences want to be seen, want to be held. It's such an important stage of this. And she called it radical acceptance. And that what happened for me in this process was it softened the heart a little bit more. And then I could see that sadness and sorrow were actually the strongest feelings, that sort of powerful aching feeling in the heart center. And then that leads into investigate, the I of investigate. And I ask in this stage, what is the need that is not being met, or what do I long for? And so with sorrow, it seemed like it was actually wanting mourning, that mourning would be what is asked for. And at first there was a bit of resistance. Really, do I want to overwhelm myself with, intense grief and so on? But I just gave it a shot. Then what happened when I was surrendering, a bit like in Rilke's poem, losing myself in your loosened hair. So what actually, when I experienced the fullness, that's now the nourish, the end of the nourish, of the fullness. You nourish yourself by experiencing the fullness of the quality you are yearning for. that you're longing for. So I could feel some tears rising, but it didn't feel necessary to discharge them. I could just hold the ache. And then it became closer to compassion, and it became closer to some of this beautiful music also that I grew up with, like Pergolese's Stabat Mater and Bach and so on. And the sort of keening lament of women at a funeral, that's also in many cultures there. And so it became about so much more than just me, and I allowed myself to be engulfed by the universality of grief.
Okay.
And then the imagine. So this is where I'm moving on from Tara Brach. So from deep within myself, I let a metaphor for that quality arise. So I could see and feel a deep lake, and maybe a lake of tears surrounded by hills and nourished by a broad waterfall. And I could see this scene illuminated by a mysterious light. And it seemed as if there was a compassionate, smiling presence hovering in this peaceful atmosphere. And this presence was welcoming the sorrow.
Beautiful.
And then the next, the N is for no limits. So I asked, from the perspective of this metaphor, what could the world look like? And so I see the whole world based in this beautiful, compassionate light. And in some mysterious way, it is both the sorrow and the easing of it. And this light touches the face of the distressed refugees and, many other people who have lost love, life, belonging, status, and so on. And I imagine all these people finding support to process these traumatic experiences, and imagine them all being able to hold their pain and mourn, as I'm doing. Then the next one is going forth. That's what the last G stands for, going forth. So what is the small, doable step? So it comes like from the experience of allowing the feelings, imagining the bigger perspectives, to actually making an action step. And what two things sprang to my mind. One is actually to donate more to the cause of Ukrainian refugees. And the other one was to set up a grieving circle for people who want a safe context to process difficult experiences about what is going on in the world.
That's perfect. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. Imagine, no limits, going forth. I like that. As you were describing that, especially the going forth step, in my mind, I thought that's active compassion.
Yes.
Which is what we want, because compassion is, I believe, an action, not just a thought. And so
it is actually something like active hope as well. It's like you don't ask whether it's realistic to make everything better for, the millions of refugees. That would be unrealistic. But you just trust that if you surrender to this stream of compassionate energy that is bigger than you, then only good things can come out of this.
And with that, as we wrap up our discussion, instead of taking you out on my usual outro music and tagline, I thought we would enjoy some music from Pergolesi, a Baroque composer and a favorite of Ratnadevi.